tried to move the baseball to make an extra baseball float down that direction. When I did pop in the north, other times informal, like I said, formal parking area, river access down
Good afternoon and welcome to lunch. Keep eating. We want to get going. We have a couple hour agenda here. We want to get through this as quick as we can. I'll call this meeting to order. This is we have open this meeting now posted somewhere. Okay, so it's out there if you really want to read it. This is the March 26th MAPA Council Officials meeting. We are at Iowa Western Community College. It's a beautiful campus. I'd like to thank the Iowa Western folks for having us. It was just 3 short months ago we were at Metro Tech, so it's a pleasure to see the community colleges in action. This is a beautiful campus. And the work and the opportunities that both the Omaha Metro Tech and Iowa Western, the opportunities and provide a great opportunity for families to get affordable education and provide great learning environments. So they provide immense value to the communities that they're in, and it's a pleasure to be here today. The Reavers football team, if you're not a fan, is they're on a roll like Nebraska was in the 90s. So they've won 3 of the last 4 national championships, including last year. So they have great athletic facilities. As you drove in, you saw all the complexes, so they're not afraid to invest in that part of their college opportunity. At this time, I will call the business meeting to order. This meeting is a Metropolitan Area Planning Agency officials. We're in compliance with the Opens Meeting Act, is out on the front desk. To help us stay on schedule in today's meeting, we won't be going around the room for introductions. Please take a moment to check your name tags and confirm you are a voting member. That will be on your name tag. And we have also confirmed that we have a quorum, so we're ready to conduct some business. With that, I will introduce Iowa Potawatomi County Supervisor Brian Shea for information on the county.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to Potawatomi County. We enjoy having you here. One of the neatest things about Potawatomi County is this school and what they've done here. And going forward, it's really going to be exciting. There's a lot of new stuff happening here in Council Bluffs and Potawatomi County. One of our challenges is everything that's happening in Des Moines. We're in the political season, so there's so many different formulas happening with the taxes, I'll say, just because we're not sure what we're going to wind up with. But one of the things we got in Pot County, we've got great people. We've got these neat little towns. Council Bluffs has changed so much in the last 30 years. We've got amenities here. Our conservation department runs our parks, which if you've never been to our parks, we've got Hitchcock, Bottom Bend, Arrowhead, many others that we've got. And then we've got the Crescent Ski Hills. And that's been controversial, but it's been very good. And it's won quite a few awards. And whether we like it or not, it's making money. So that's a good deal. And it brings a lot of people in from Omaha to come over here and drop some money in our counties. We like that. I want to talk about collaboration just a second, and the amount of groups that are helping to grow and bring businesses and get things rolling good is so important out here. We love Iowa West. We've got Advance Southwest Iowa, the White Foundation, of course, our own department, which is planning and zoning, which is so important, and they're easy to work with, and we're on track to grow. Each of our little towns, big towns, the county, we're improving roads, we're improving trails, and we're improving parks. And what we want to do is invite you to come enjoy them all. So come spend some money. Okay, I want to introduce the new mayor of Council Bluffs. It's Jill Shudak, and she's just started her term the beginning of January, and we'll let her say a few words. Thank you.
Okay, it's before noon, so I'll say good morning to everybody. Thank you for having me here, and welcome to Council Bluffs. So as Supervisor Shea mentioned, I am newly elected to the position. I took office January 2nd. Prior to that, I was on the City Council, and prior to that, I was on the Board of Education for Council Bluffs Schools. So I welcome you to our community. Few topics that I want to touch on before we continue with the program is the amount of progress that we've made in the city and how we're going to continue to make that progress. So this campus is one of those amazing opportunities. So a little known fact, Brian, I don't even think you know this about me, but my mom worked here part-time when I was in elementary. So when I'm the youngest of three, and when she went back to work, she worked here at the community college. At that time, it was the large tower that sits in the middle of the campus in one building. And about 3 years after she started working there, they opened up the preschool. And so one of my brothers and myself went to preschool on this campus. We went through and have seen it evolve. I graduated with my associate's degree here on this campus. I, as a school board member, sat just across the hall in the auditorium for the Promise to Succeed ceremonies every single year. And one of the great things about Council Bluffs Schools and Council Bluffs itself is that we value education greatly. And so there is a goal within Council Bluffs Schools that every child graduates with a high school diploma plus a second credential at the time of graduation. And so last year we had over 85% of our kids either graduate with a certificate or an associate's degree or some type of credential the week prior to getting their high school diploma. So it's an amazing partnership that we have here with Iowa Western. The community is very proud of Iowa Western, and I'm proud to be a Reaver as well. I'd like to just touch base then on additional opportunities that we're seeing in the city. So we have great work going down on the riverfront where the Adventure Tower is going in, the Treetop Box going in, as well as the pier. We'll be working on putting in a great playground then down there as well for the kids, just adjacent to the Great Lawn. We have a great housing addition that has started. We started pouring foundations down in our East Manawa subdivision last week. And we have over 3,000 units of different types of housing that are in some type of planning phase or construction phase at this time. So Council Bluffs is growing, and I'm very proud to be the mayor and very proud to the things that are going forward. To piggyback on what Brian said, we really need to make sure that we are collaborating with our partners. And I want to touch base as a newly elected mayor of how valuable MAPA has been and the community has been to me as the newly elected mayor. So whether it's about transportation planning, infrastructure investments, community development, regional coordination, MAPA has provided me great resources and guidance and leadership to help our community move forward. So I'd like to take just a moment to thank MAPA and the staff and leadership for the continued support you provide to the local governments like ours. Your expertise and willingness to listen and your commitment to regional partner cooperation makes a real difference. So thank you guys very much. I also want to just take a moment to just recognize all the elected officials here in the room. Without you, all of our communities wouldn't be as strong as they are, and it is amazing partnership that we have and working together. So thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to be here. So now I'd like to introduce someone who's also doing important work in our region's future workforce. Katie Lewis is the director of Southwest Iowa Technical Career Hub. Her and her team are helping connect students with hands-on career pathways and technical training opportunities that support both our local industries and the long-term economic growth of our community. Please welcome me and joining Katie to the stage.
Welcome to Iowa Western. On behalf of Iowa Western Community College, I want to welcome you and MAPA's Council of Directors, elected officials, staff, and esteemed guests. Thank you for the time that you're taking to be here and your leadership each of you provide your communities. Before we begin, I want to start something quick, just kind of engage all of us. If you've traveled less than 30 minutes to get here, raise your hand. Keep your hand up if you had coffee before arriving. And keep your hand up if you had to have coffee this morning to get through a meeting. So as you can see, we all have a few things in common, right? But in all seriousness, that quick show of hands helps us highlight the important work that each of you here do today. And that is, no matter how far you travel, whether it's 10 minutes, over 30 minutes, what does that look like? We all represent communities that are connected. And through our roads, our economy, our workforce, and our shared priorities for the future, we are here today. The reason I'm here to welcome you today is Switch's connection to Iowa Western and MAPA. My name is Katie Lewis, and I'm the founding director for Switch, and it's now been rebranded to Switch Lakin Foundation Training Hub. The generous $1 million gift from the Lakin Foundation provides support for learning, training, and connection. I know both speakers already have spoken about collaboration, and that is my philosophy as a director. We will not survive in rural Iowa if we do not collaborate, and I see that as certainly our future. Dr. Kenny and his Iowa Western team were founding educational partners for Switch. Without Dr. Kenny's vision and ability to secure $1 million of Career Academy Incentive Fund from the state of Iowa, we would not be in the transformation that we are today as a training hub. Iowa Western provides 5 different classes at Switch. They offer CNA, Certified Nursing Assistant, CDL, Commercial Driver's License, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. They're bringing construction trades this fall, and then human management and resources this fall as well. We've gone from 15 students to 45, and we expect to be 90 students just with those programs itself. The other thing is we have 70,000 square feet, and we have 20-some acres. And what do we do with that space? We started renting it out to educational partners. And the educational partners went from 2, which was Iowa Western and Head Start last year, and a building full of auction item furniture, which was a lot, to 8 partners this year, to being clearly almost full. We have 5 rooms left. And the CDL program outside, and we are going to be able to pay 80% of our costs with the rent that comes in for that space. So as a nonprofit, it's huge for us, and we've seen tremendous growth just with the belief the partners have around us, the partners we have in the communities, and we offer some kind of education or services from pre-K through adults in that space. We've built our own ecosystem. We came to know MAPA because we explored an EDA grant with them to build out training opportunities and paths, and our paths across many times. Because Switch has become a place of employment as well as educational and economic development and a collaborative service hub. I was just sharing earlier that we didn't realize Switch would become an employer through our educational partners. And in fact, 14 people have been hired, local people have been hired to work at Switch, which isn't a huge number, but it's significant when you look at 15,000 people live in Mills County. And 4 of those people were hired on by Iowa Western. And so they provide services in their own communities through the educational opportunities Iowa Western offers. Switch has secured and helped secure over $2.4 million since its humble beginnings in August 2022. We have served over 600 people in this past year, and we have planned for more to come. Our most recent addition is our commercial kitchen. We are by no means Kitchen Council, and we will not be that Cadillac, but we will provide services in our area that are much needed. If you travel between Malvern and Red Oak on Highway 34, we're exactly in the middle of that. And there are no restaurants, and there are no grocery stores, and there's only one convenience store. So when you look at our population, we have seen a need, and we want to fill that. And as big as it is to put your arms around Switch and understand what it is, and we're truly just an educational hub that provides space to experts like Iowa Western to provide their services to the community, the kitchen has become a bigger animal than even I thought it would become, and because there's such a need. And so that is something that we're working toward. One story I love to tell is the educational partners live in the building go from Head Start Preschool to Rising Hope Academy, which is a therapeutic school through Green Hills AEA. Green Hills AEA Red Oak office is moving to Switch this fall. They're bringing 60 people with them. And then we have Iowa Western Community College, Clarkson College out of Omaha is there as well. And then, I know I'm forgetting some, but we have partners on the outside of the building as well that also work in that space. We have one from New York, and then we have IJAG, which is Iowa Jobs for Marist Graduates. So the connection here transcends beyond coffee to your participation that ensures the voices of MAPA's region. From rural areas to growing cities, these are all part of the conversations that influence transportation, investments, economic development strategies, infrastructure planning, regional collaboration. Together, your work will strengthen our shared economy, improve mobility, and enhance the life and quality of life for residents throughout the region, and they'll shape the longevity and resilience of this little corner of the world. As we listen to MAPA's business items, agency reports, and the keynote panel of leaders, let it serve as a reminder of the importance of each of us sharing updates, discussing priorities, and continuing to build partnerships that make MAPA's regional approach successful. The work presented here today will likely reflect the commitment of each of you as local leaders who recognize the many opportunities and also challenges that you face that are best addressed together. So thank you again for your service. Thank you for coming to Iowa Western today, and welcome, and let's get started.
Thank you, Katie, Jill, and Brian for sharing what's going on in your communities and the exciting growth that's happening and the addition that you're making to the community as a whole. Our next agenda item is a business item. We need to, and it's our only business item, is item approve the minutes from the December 10th, 2025 meeting. We have a motion.
Second.
Who's second?
Station.
Oh, Keith Station. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Okay, so we're at agency reports, Executive Director Mark Overson. Welcome.
Okay, well, I can officially say good afternoon now. So thank you for joining us here this morning and this afternoon. So excited to be here. And boy, I just want to throw away my presentation because thank you, Katie, for elevating, I think, really the importance of this work. When we started meeting with Switch several years ago, it was a very pie-in-the-sky dream about what to do with this facility that had been really, through a bond issue, left, empty in the middle of the county. Huge opportunity. So thank you for your leadership, Katie, in bringing those partners together. You've seen it through. You've been there from day one. So thank you so much for that and really elevating the importance of all this work. I'm going to highlight a few things. This is kind of the middle of our budget season here at MAPA. So I'm going to have Grant Anderson and Carlos Morales from our team come up and actually talk a little bit about the work that we're going to be looking ahead to. But I wanted to take a moment to talk a bit about one really key issue that we're keeping our eye on. Earlier this year, in February, we took a group of our board members, Mayor Ewing from Omaha, Mayor Shudak from Council Bluffs, so thank you for joining us so early in your term, as well as Mayor Kindig, our board chair, to Washington, D.C. for the National Association of Regional Councils Conference. This is our annual policy conference out in D.C. where we hear from federal agencies, we connect with partners from across the country, and also make those visits to the Hill to talk about our priorities. And as in most years, we're emphasizing transportation funding, we're emphasizing economic development, and really some of those critical HUD programs like CDBG, like HOME, that help really have that federal and local partnership that delivers really key projects. And this year, transportation authorization is really at the top of that list. On the table, the registration table, and I think it's actually out here too, there's a summary of what's called the Basics Act, which has been introduced kind of right after that conference that really highlights, I think, some of the key priorities we've talked about how local leaders can really have more of a say in the federal transportation planning process, whether that's more sub-allocation of funds, those funds that flow through MAPA, that we have local leaders really at the decision-making table for, or changes in how we partner with our state DOTs, accelerate project delivery, and really bring more of those federal dollars back home to our communities. We know there are needs across our region as it relates to infrastructure, and more resources, more local leaders at the table to help guide that ship is really a critical piece. So thank you to Mayor Shudak and others for joining us on this trip. It was insightful. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose, but really want to emphasize, if you're talking to your congressional representatives, really emphasizing the importance of transportation reauthorization to your community is important, and our team is happy to help connect you with those resources. This time of year, I mentioned it's our budget season, and in this March Council officials, we're always kind of talking about where we're going and what's really up next for MAPA as we think about our budget and our work programs, kind of the statement of work for the year ahead. And we start that process with our annual survey. This is just one of those touch points that we do with our members. And it's really an opportunity for us to ask, about those kind of top 3 priorities. Where do you see MAPA being able to fit into your work over the next year? But then we also ask about those training and professional development opportunities. MAPA, we're a convener. You're all here today. And a lot of times that peer exchange is a really important part of what we want to be able to deliver for partners at the local level. And so we want to know what key issues there are there. And so we just wrapped up this survey in February. Here to talk a little bit about the priorities, and Grant and Carlos will really translate that into what that means for the year ahead. But overall, we had 23 responses, which is actually ticking up. I know this number every year. I want it to be bigger, so you're all welcome to participate more. But a really good cross-section of communities from across our region, large and small, a lot of villages and small communities who MAPA really is on that front line of serving, took time to participate, which we're so grateful for. And really a good representation across both Iowa and Nebraska as well. And so we're really grateful for those of you that took the time to respond. Thank you, and our teams are going to be following up with you on some of those key priorities that you highlighted. But just to summarize a little bit about what we heard in the survey, it's relatively new for MAPA to put out a survey and to hear such a resounding support and need around housing. That is an area that MAPA hasn't been traditionally terribly involved in across the region. We've supported some projects, some smaller things. Been an area of growth for us. But this year it was almost universal, that housing development, attainable housing at all levels, really being an important and critical aspect of work that communities are seeking support for. And another nearly universal idea is trails. And it's a place that we have been very active in supporting both active mobility planning in some of our larger communities across the region, to our support of Potawatomi County Trails groups and Mills County Trail groups on the Iowa side. And so there's a tremendous amount of work to be done in addition to the work that we've already accomplished. But there's a lot of things that we can see as commonalities between our largest communities and our smallest communities in areas where the MAPA staff can be a good resource for all of that. And then third, but very close behind those top 2, is infrastructure funding. You'll see in the next slide about those training needs and those professional development opportunities that we highlighted. Navigating funding sources is really a key need that's been identified. How do we prepare our community? How do we really kind of take a posture to accelerate what we're able to do? Maybe we have an idea we think is 5 to 10 years down the road. Maybe there's an opportunity to start that work this year or next year. What does that look like? And really looking to the MAPA team to help support that. And then across the board, some scattering of support depending on the community for things like downtown revitalization and placemaking, economic development and job creation, like those kind of very collaborative partnerships that we talked about, finding those themes in areas like childcare and housing and placemaking to really drive economic development in communities. And then also sustainability and solid waste management. I saw Kent. Kent is here. Kent is our avatar, or there he is. Kent is our avatar for solid waste management at the regional level, and he's been doing a great job of pulling us in and pulling a lot of the regional partners together to think about the opportunities that exist in there, and really being a leader in Nebraska in particular for the work that's happening around extended producer responsibility and batteries and things that are really driving safety issues in our region's landfills. So all that is to say, a lot of support for the work that MAPA is already doing, and I think really a good affirmation of areas that we want to continue to work in the year ahead. On that training opportunities piece, as I kind of buried the lead here, but we had a lot of support. Again, a lot of folks saying that among the needs that they have for training and professional development, or among the value that they have in getting together with their peers across the region, is really about how do we access those funding opportunities? How do we position ourselves to be in a better position to compete for federal funding or to access the resources that are already available to us? Those economic development strategies for communities, again, places like this where we could kind of share those stories. We hosted the Collaborative Future Summit last fall with the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce in 6 regions, 1 Nebraska, to highlight some of those different approaches that we're seeing to economic development across the region, to all of that building capacity and leadership. Grant Anderson's team is doing a tremendous amount of sustainability, or I should say, a tremendous amount of capacity building in communities through strategic planning, needs assessments, goals setting, workshops, and we see a lot of affirmation for continuing that work here in the year to come. And I think that funding navigation, you'll see, ties very closely to some of the priorities that we're going to talk about, both on Grant's team and the work that he's doing here, but also in TRIPS, which Carlos is going to talk a little bit about here in the slide to come. So we're talking about MAPA's budget, we're talking about MAPA's priorities. This slide has evolved over the years, but one of the things that we like to really focus on is our commitment to implementing our MAPA Board of Directors strategic plans. We have these kind of key strategic areas that are really about MAPA's internal work, how do we organize and really posture ourselves to deliver that high quality service to our members. And really we try to translate that both through our budget and our work program into that really responsive model for our members and priorities. And a lot of that comes from that input. That survey is just one aspect of it. We're in communities, we're at meetings, we're listening to those things all year long. But we really try to have that be kind of our guiding principle so that we can take those priorities that our board has given us and translate that into our budget, which we do adopt late in May and in June at this next Council of Officials meeting. And with that, I'm going to invite Grant Anderson up to talk a little bit about the community development priorities here for the year ahead, and then we'll follow that with Carlos to talk a little bit about the TRIPS project. Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Grant Anderson. I am the manager of our Community and Economic Development team, or as we affectionately call it in the office, ComDev. So in ComDev, we provide direct planning services to our member communities and partners. So think in terms of grant writing and administration, technical assistance, local planning, basically anything that is kind of under the umbrella of community and economic development. I often say that we are an extension of local governments. What that means is we want to be in a position where we can support our members, the members that probably don't have the internal staffing or capacity to do a lot of planning or long-term work, anything that's kind of beyond just the regular day-to-day business of running the local government. So what this slide here represents are our priorities for the year. And as Mike mentioned, this is informed by several things, but we make an attempt to have one-on-one visits with communities, whether it's just a small conversation with some staff or attending city council meetings. The annual member survey feedback, that feeds into it as well. But every year we keep tabs on what we're hearing and what we see in survey responses. So here are our priorities essentially. The grant writing and administration, that's really kind of the bread and butter of what our department does. That's grant writing on behalf of our members, and that can be anything from infrastructure, economic development, housing. Again, if it touches community and economic development, we can help with grant writing and grant management. The MAPA Foundation strategic plan. So many of you might not know that there is the MAPA Foundation, a nonprofit organization housed under MAPA. And for several years now, the foundation, which was originally created to receive tax-deductible donations for a program that no longer exists, but anyway, the state of Nebraska, the Department of Economic Development, has allowed us to retain community development block grant program income funds to capitalize for a revolving loan fund. And for a long time now, that fund has remained relatively idle, but we have recently solicited for a consultant to work with us, to provide us with some strategies on how we can activate these funds, make them work for our members, for our region, specifically in spaces around housing and disaster preparedness and resiliency. So those proposals are due at the end of the week, and hopefully once we have a contract in place, we can start that process and complete that within about 6 months. Disaster preparedness and response. So I think most of us in the room would agree that, especially in the last several years, we've seen a greater frequency of severe weather, very disruptive and destructive severe weather events, which is kind of creating this perpetual cycle of recovery. It really hinders communities to go above and beyond when they're just trying to recover from the latest incident. And MAPA historically has had a role post-disaster that's largely been grant writing or grant administration for disaster-related programs. But we realize that there are probably gaps where we could help fill, or there are resources that we could leverage, partnerships that we could bridge that might advance disaster recovery work more regionally. And so that's kind of a focus of us to regionalize disaster recovery, or at least identify ways that it can be made more efficient. So in the coming months, we'll be meeting with emergency management coordinators and just other people that work in the sphere of disaster mitigation and recovery to see how we can grow and provide more services as an agency. Community assistance and training opportunities, Mike touched on this a little bit. In the past, we've met communities where they are to provide training on things like grant writing, project management, how to run public meetings, and that's something that we've received very positive feedback on, but I think we'd like to do that on a more consistent and regular basis. So another thing, and this is very preliminary, but we've had some early conversations with UNO and Creighton to talk about creating kind of a pipeline of interns, and these would be grad and undergrad students, that if there are projects locally that align with student interests, we can match student interns with communities to help them implement projects. So we're kind of thinking in terms of things that are maybe aspirational, or things that a local city clerk or some volunteers just don't have the time to achieve. A few more things: military installation readiness. About 10 years ago, we worked with Offutt Air Force Base to create what's called a joint land use study, or JLUST. That was a plan that looked at how land use and zoning can affect the base's operations and just overall readiness. So obviously the base is a huge economic anchor and engine for this region. And we've had some conversations recently with the Greater Omaha Chamber and the base to revisit the JLUST and maybe take it to the next level. So we're working on some opportunities to fund a plan that would revisit the JLUST, but also look at the base's readiness and operational capabilities through the lenses of traffic and transportation infrastructure and natural disasters, severe weather. And finally, brownfields assessment grant implementation. Earlier this year, we partnered with the Omaha Inland Port Authority to submit a grant application to EPA to basically assess properties in the Port Authority's footprint, looking at properties that have known or suspected environmental contamination. So the end goal, long-term, would be to remediate those properties and set them up for future redevelopment. Finally, I just wanted to touch on our department's funding in a very broad and general sense, and these numbers are pretty preliminary, but I just want to paint a picture. What we do really relies on funding that we receive from state and federal partners, contracts that we have with our local members for services that we provide, and then membership dues. So here you can see who or what our major sources of funding are. These numbers aren't likely to wow you, and in the coming year, it is my hope and my goal to be a little more opportunistic and grow revenue that we receive from contracts and service agreements. We're a small department, we're 4, but we have to realize that we just need to be opportunistic, and we need to do the best job that we can when it comes to aligning community needs with grant opportunities that are currently out there. So I've probably spoken more, or I've taken up more time than I should have, but I'll be sticking around throughout the meeting and after if anyone has any questions or would like to discuss any of this with me further. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon all. Carlos, Transportation Data Manager. Just a brief high level overview of what's the year ahead for our transportation department. Some of the things that we will be working on in the coming years, and you'll hear plenty more, is really this TRIPS, this Transformative Regional Investment Prioritization System. I'll get into the details of that, but in the coming years, you'll see us in your offices, in the community, talking more about trips. And we'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to continue our work with safety, reconnecting communities off of Highway 75 between Sorensen and Cummings Street is a major project. And then this kind of first in our region, a regional freight plan led by our very own Jen Warner, who's here on today. But those are kind of the big high-level work products that we're going to try to get through. Many of these projects are multi-year, multifaceted, and requires a lot from not just our staff, but from you all, and coordinating and talking and coming to meetings. So without further ado, here is TRIPS. Anyone heard of TRIPS before? Yay! Internal staff. So this is discretionary grant. We were able to apply $2 million for the region for the next several years. And this is kind of the nexus of how we currently do things. We work on our long-range transportation plan. We build up a project selection and prioritize projects, and then take it to our transportation improvement program. Some of the things that we found out thus far, many projects experience delays in delivering or allocating funding, which results in inefficiencies. A lot of complaints about navigating all the federal rules and regulations to complete projects, and then the lack of shovel-ready projects within the region to take advantage of those discretionary opportunities. Many applications go unfunded because we're not shovel-ready, right? So the overall goals of what we're trying to do with TRIPS, this is the general grant speak, but to bring it down to our levels, we want to bring in more money to support local communities, save money and increase public satisfaction, focus our resources where they will do the most good, and strengthen the trust and confidence in local government. That's honestly all we're trying to do with TRIPS. So this is kind of a paradigm shift, right? We're going to start with the regional goals. What are the goals and outcomes that we want to see in our transportation network and beyond? To then lead into our prioritization. How do we prioritize the projects that are coming in that then get fed up to our long-range transportation plan, which then get fed into a funding mechanism? That is really what we're trying to do. Flipping the switch, if you will, on how we deliver projects more effectively, more efficiently, and in a shorter span of time. Sorry. This is our general timeline for this project. Majority of the work right now is going to be led off by Court from our team. And we're going to be going out to local communities. If you haven't reached out yet, or you haven't received an email requesting more information, feel free to reach out to us. We'll also reach out to you. But the first part is really data gathering, understanding the local systems and how local communities are prioritizing their projects and moving them forward. This will lead through scoping and developing a new system, a new tool system that may be available for others to use. But that is really the key nexus of the work right now. It's really about revisiting and understanding the local priorities that get fed into our larger transportation planning work, but it's really here, meeting with the local staffs and local jurisdictions. Again, I cannot stress this enough. We need you to be able to understand where the MAPA process and the federal funding cycles fit into your projects and into your local communities to make the most of this kind of transformative, if you will, opportunity for the region. If you have additional questions, myself, my staff, we're here today, happy to take them. We try to keep this short, but that's it.
All right. Well, as you can see, a lot of the work ahead builds on some of those goals that we talked about from the member survey, particularly around really increasing communities' access to those funding resources. I'm happy to answer any questions now if there are any. Otherwise, I'm excited to welcome up our keynote speakers here today. So we actually have a panel of local leaders who are going to be joining us. So we have Shannon Coleman from OPPD, we have Charlie Hedstrom from Black Hills Energy, and Luke Seberg from Iowa State Extension. So we'll kick this effort up. If you all want to come up here, I'm going to give them a chance to actually introduce themselves. So I want to talk a little bit about the conversation that we're hoping to have today. And really, as we've done a lot of our planning, as we're out in communities and we're talking to folks about those economic development priorities, we hear over and over again about really the centrality of energy to our economic development conversations. And, when we're talking about energy, that's energy of all forms. It's electric, it's about gas, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about, big changes in the economy that are driving new challenges. But at the core of it is really, again, many of the same challenges that we navigate with our local community members, which is, how do we kind of put our best foot forward, what are we aiming for, and all of those things. So we brought this panel here together today to really talk about some of those challenges and the different ways that we're approaching them as a region and in many cases as a state. And so with that, I want to first kind of go down the line here, and we'll have Shannon actually will go first based on my list here. Sorry, Luke. But really want to think about, from OPPD's perspective, you can introduce kind of your role, but then also give us a flavor for, what's different about this moment. What are you hearing about that's really making energy elevated here in the conversation today?
This one.
Should be.
You're gonna hear me, right?
I think you have to hold it.
Pull it closer.
Yeah.
Closer to it, like this, okay. Very good. Shannon Coleman, I'm the Director of Energy Portfolio Planning at OPPD, and my teams are in charge of load forecasting and resource planning. Easy stuff, right? Those are the biggest challenges that we're facing as a utility for certain. And do you want me to go ahead and speak to
Yeah,
the question?
speak to that one.
Sure. So the biggest issue to talk about, you probably have heard several utilities make the statement that we are seeing unprecedented load growth, and that is not a hyperbolic statement at all. Several utilities, us included, are seeing the highest rates of load growth that we've seen since probably the 1970s with the widespread installation of air conditioning. Instead of what we've typically seen, maybe a 1%, 1.5% annual increase in load growth, we're seeing 3%, 5%, 7% looking out into the future. So that's quite daunting. Really what's notable about what that load growth looks like is the number of requests that we're receiving and the magnitude of some of those requests. Brooke's in the room for economic development. She can certainly speak to that from a more granular level, but we're right now trying to navigate both of those situations. And the biggest problem there, or challenge, opportunity there, is the unpredictability of what that load growth looks like, and specific to those load growth requests. So we're dealing with that unpredictability. We have to look at those load requests and say,
how can we determine the probability of those requests, those inquiries, moving from just a question, a knock on the door, all the way through project development and end up as a load on our system? How do we determine what that probability is at the beginning stages? And then how do we put into place requirements of the customer so that the customer is demonstrating to us what their level of commitment is? And then that translates into what is that probability. Looking at kind of individual requests, we then have to roll that up. And what does that do to our system? So then you're faced with not just the probability of one specific load request turning into load, but now we're aggregating 20, 25 plus load requests and trying to determine the probability of each of those moving forward. How will they move forward? When will they move forward? All of those questions. So a lot of unpredictability there. And what that unpredictability presents to us is risk, and risk in both directions. We have a risk of underbuilding, underestimating what that load looks like into the future, because as public power, we have an obligation to serve load in our territory. So if we underbuild, that is a risk that we're not serving our community. If we overbuild, we have the opposite risk, right? We have a very real capital investment that we're making, and we need to match that against revenue from new load. If we mismatch that, that's decades of debt that we took on. And then you're faced with, you have a customer that either doesn't come on at all, comes on at a lower level than what you were predicting, or comes onto the system and then leaves within a few years. All of those are real risks that we're trying to bake in right now. So that's a lot. And that's only dealing with the requests that you know right now. Obviously, there are future requests that we don't even have visibility into. So what does that look like in the future? Will the current trends continue? Are we in a bubble and that's all going to decrease back down? Or the opposite? Are we just seeing the beginning of an upward trend? We just don't have those answers right now. So it's a really real challenge that we're dealing with right now. And something we have to look at. Planning for a new resource takes 5-6 years. So we're having to start actions right now for loads that we think will come on in 5 or 6 years. So there's a lot of challenge there, just really specific to load growth and how we plan for future load growth. Opportunities certainly, but challenges as well, and just the quantification of what that looks like and when we think it's coming out of the system. Another challenge that we're dealing with right now is system stress. In terms of generation and infrastructure, our assets are seeing stress conditions that they were never designed for. We're looking at not only from that load growth standpoint, but also extreme weather events, dealing with response to the intermittency of renewable generation. There's just a lot of conditions that our system that was built 50, 60 years ago wasn't necessarily designed for. So we're seeing kind of the impacts of that. You have an aging infrastructure base that now has to respond to conditions that it necessarily was not designed for. So that is another challenge we're dealing with right now. And then another picture I would say with the current energy environment is customer involvement. We're seeing a lot more interest and involvement from our customers and all of our customers, from residential and the interest and willingness to install residential solar and storage and what that does to the system from a positive impact, and also our large commercial and industrial customers. A lot of willingness there to install on-site generation and help us from the load challenge that way. Also some opportunities for curtailable load programs. We have a lot of larger customers that have shown a willingness to get involved from that standpoint. So definitely customers wanting to be part of the solution and recognizing the current environment that we're in. So I could talk all day. I'll let someone else go ahead.
That's excellent. Charlie, why don't you talk a little bit about your role in Black Hill's orientation to some of these issues?
I'm Charlie Hedstrom. I manage the biz dev team for Black Hills Energy for Iowa and Nebraska. So as far as what, my team specifically is working with large volume users of natural gas. It could be ag, it could be like a Cargill, it could be data centers, it could be sugar beets in western Nebraska. But it's from a load perspective, what we are seeing is, like Shannon talked about, they're 5 years out in getting electricity to a data center. They're looking for speed to power now. Data centers are looking for 200 megawatts, 400, 600 megawatts. They are turning to natural gas to run gas turbines, to run rice engines for those facilities. So that's what we're seeing across Iowa. We have 5 projects that we're working on currently. I mean, it's very interesting. I do think it's going to take everything to get these data centers up and running. It's going to take electric, it's going to take gas, it's going to take renewables, it's wind, solar, hydro, it's going to take nuclear, and coal is still in the mix here as well. So from a load standpoint, really the demand we're seeing is really the data centers. One we're talking to in the Lake Manawa area, they're looking for 70 to 80,000 decatherms a day. That is the size of Kearney, Nebraska, running that. So we can get them gas, it just takes time and money. So is that what you're looking for, Mike?
Yeah, time and money, that's the story.
It's time and money.
We can put that up on a slide. Luke, do you want to talk a little bit about your role?
Sure. So I am Luke Seberg. I work for Iowa State University's Extension and Outreach Unit and the Community and Economic Development Unit. There I focus on kind of the intersection of land use planning, zoning, and energy policy. Sort of the bread and butter of what I do is working with local officials, whether those be city councilors, county supervisors, planning commissioners, zoning board of adjustment members, COG officials, you name it, to sort of help them understand what their roles and responsibilities are as they pertain to land use, and more specifically, the intersection therein, energy and land use. And so what I've been working on over the last several years through Extension is sort of building a statewide coalition in Iowa of groups that are interested in providing educational resources to local officials, such as many of you in the room here, to ensure that the decisions that you make around siting, permitting, and planning some of these utility scale projects, specifically wind, solar, and batteries, those decisions are made with the most information available, the most accurate information available, as well as the sort of right balance of balancing local priorities with some kind of larger picture perspectives. Maybe that's state economic development goals, maybe that's federal policy. Federal policy landscape has obviously changed a great deal over the last couple of years, so we've kind of had to adjust some of our efforts and endeavors there. But by and large, working with local officials, hearing what they've got to say about kind of these projects in their communities, what they're hearing from their constituents, what their constituents' concerns are, and trying to make sure that if a project is going to get permitted and built in a community, that a community is able to take advantage of that project in some way, shape, or form that's concrete to the community's residents and doesn't just leave residents stuck with all of the negative externalities that some of these projects might cause without kind of capturing the positive benefits. So sort of helping folks see the forest for the trees, as it were. We don't do anything with wood energy, though.
Next time.
Yeah.
So Shannon, you laid out some of what you're seeing kind of both on the demand side and just the realities of building projects. I know that OPPD and all power generators, you exist within kind of an external context as well. And do you want to talk a little bit about your relationship to Southwest Power Pool and how that informs some of the planning that you're ramping up for?
Sure. As I mentioned, we are members of the Southwest Power Pool, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a pool of power resources. So the way that SPP functions is a little bit unique to how most people probably would imagine that we dispatch and operate our units. So all of the utilities within Southwest Power Pool, which is the central part of the country, pool their resources, and then SPP actually dispatches all of those resources to serve the collective load in the order of operating cost. So the idea there is to be the most efficient and cost-effective totality of resources serving load. And because of that, because SPP has the responsibility for actually operating the RTO, they also prioritize at the highest level reliability of the system. That's their number one goal. So because of that, they put into place several requirements for the utilities that operate within SPP. And obviously we have to then comply with a very long list of requirements. And that can be a challenge, but again, the ultimate goal there is to increase and enhance the reliability of the system. So maybe some short-term pain for long-term gain there, certainly. One of the challenges in operating within SPP is that anytime you want to add a large load onto the system or a large generator onto the system, those additions have to be studied by SPP. And they don't just study your individual unit or your individual load, they cluster them together and do studies of several generators or several loads all at once. That takes a lot of time. The study alone takes years just to do the study. And then the outcome of that study is to say, can the current system handle the addition of that generator or the addition of that load as is, or are there upgrades required? So then you are limited on whether and when you can interconnect to the system. You basically have to wait for those upgrades to take place. So again, you're adding years onto the system. Even if you're ready to go, if your project is ready to go, you have to wait for the study system or study process and the upgrades obviously to take place. So that is a timeline that we are subject to and do not control. And that's obviously happening in parallel with supply chain issues, equipment manufacturing issues, gas supply, things like that also take time and also take money. So that's another layer of SPP that we fit within. And then the last thing I would mention in terms of SPP is policy. In the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen quite a number of new policies implemented within SPP, again, with the goal of enhancing the reliability of the region. The first thing to mention is that every utility is required to supply capacity generation to meet their peak hour, plus a certain margin that takes care of contingency situations. Because of recent extreme weather situations, that margin amount has greatly increased. It's increased for both the summer and really increased for the winter. That means every utility in SPP is required to bring more generation capacity to the table and provide more generation capacity. The second layer of that is what those generators are actually worth in SPP, called your accreditation. So every unit gets a certain amount of their capacity counted for against your peak load. What SPP was seeing was that the thermal generation in particular, which was formerly counted at whatever you could test it at. So you test it for a number of hours, whatever you could reach within those number of hours you get to count. And they were seeing during actual peak conditions, a lot of those units were not showing up to the level that they were previously accredited. So they've put into place a new system where there's a look back at your actual historical performance, and particularly during those peak load hours. So as you can imagine, utilities across the region now took a haircut on the capacity that they had available from that generation. So higher margin, lower accreditation. You have a lot of utilities that suddenly need additional capacity. So that's definitely something that, again, short term may be a challenge for a lot of utilities. In the long term, will definitely enhance the reliability of the region itself. And then the last point of policy I would bring up is that SPP is seeing the same thing across the region, where there are a lot of large loads requesting to interconnect to the system. SPP is really undergoing a lot of effort to allow that interconnection with optionality. So can you bring a co-located resource with your large load? Here's a process for that. Are you willing to be a curtailable load? Are you willing to shave your peak off when the region as a whole sees its peak in order to kind of help out? So SPP is trying to put these things in place, and obviously working through those as they come on. But those are some challenges and opportunities, I would say, that we deal with the larger regional organization.
Yeah, excellent. Charlie, you touched on this a little bit in your opening remarks, but with this kind of all of the above approach, it's going to take everything. How are you seeing kind of the interface between maybe different types of energy generation, whether it's electrical or gas, and what is Black Hills doing to kind of address that?
A lot of times it depends on economic development people. I'll give you some examples. Seward County in Nebraska, they do a great job of bringing everybody to the table, be it a dog food plant, or be it a dairy. So they'll bring everybody to the table, gas, electric, wastewater, sewer, all of the different players, get them at the table to really work through what their needs are, the loads that they have. And I mean, with a small, relatively small town like Seward, they've brought in some incredible companies. One being Dairy Inc. They'll make aseptic milk. It'll be like milk in a juice box, shelf stable. There's another large pet food manufacturer there, sprinkled in with some other industrial clients. So, you know, Mike Rooks in Washington County does a great job of bringing people to the table, deals to us. But I believe it's really getting all of the players to the table to talk about what the needs are, because we need OPPD, they need us, we need the wastewater people there, everyone needs to be there. And I think the economic development people are key for data centers. We have a lot of big developers that are coming to us, telling us what they need. And so, you know, they give us what their load information is. You know, they've told us where they want to be, how much gas they need, and the developers are doing a good job. Some of the site, I'm not seeing a lot of site development folks come to us. I see developers from the data centers, some of the local communities doing a good job. Some Nebraska economic development folks coming to us with deals, plugged into Iowa as well. So, you know, those are my thoughts.
Luke, you touched on some of the stakeholders that are kind of the audience for your work. So what have you been hearing kind of in these conversations over the last couple of years, and how does that tie to maybe things happening at the State House or other things kind of across Iowa? You know, how are we looking at that relationship really between local control and maybe those state economic development priorities?
Yeah, I think from the work that we've done thus far, and we're about a year and a half into a 3-year kind of pilot program for this kind of work, is that local officials have heard a lot from their constituents that they've had enough in many instances. I think Iowa kind of both benefits and suffers from being a first mover on wind energy over the last 15, 20 years. And then we saw several projects coming online across the state in earlier days when the technology around turbines wasn't nearly as evolved as it is today. We drove through some, I drove in from Ames, drove through some of those farms today, right? They're kind of reaching the end of their natural life, as it were. And at the local level, folks are kind of tired of seeing this type of development. People are concerned about loss of productive farm ground in many communities, and have seen some of the potential footprints of some of the utility scale solar facilities that have gone across the state, and see that as just a different version of a similar issue, loss of farm ground. So that's kind of what a certain segment of the constituents of these counties have said in public and loudly. By the same token, I think it's important to sort of recognize as well that the state, like you said, Michael, does have an economic development interest in attracting and promoting electric generation. There's language in state code around that. My colleague Noah will talk about that a little bit later in the day today. And so there is this sort of, well, there needs to be power generation built. It needs to be built somewhere. Where it gets built is still an open question. What type of power generation gets built? Each form has its own set of benefits and trade-offs, and it's trying to find a way to help folks get a better, kind of more holistic sense of what those benefits and trade-offs are, while still being responsive to community concerns, and also doing what is possible to address those community concerns, sort of move beyond a yes versus a no to more of a, okay, these are our community's red lines. These are the things that we find to be the most important to our identity, to our existing economic systems, our existing sort of sphere of economic development priorities. Developer, can you make changes to your project in a way that still allows you to earn a reasonable return, but also makes makes more of the community, if not super happy, at least able to stomach some of these projects.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So Shannon, you really set the stage, I think, for where OPPD is as a system and how you're thinking about these issues. I know that you're not standing back and kind of just admiring the problem. I know you're gearing up for this ISP process. Do you want to talk a little bit about the opportunity for local leaders to get involved in that?
Sure, this is very exciting. We are embarking now, and have done some of the beginning work on our integrated system plan. This is something that we engage in every 5 years with some interim studies in between those 5-year cycles. But the idea is long-term planning. So we model our system out long-term and look at what are the needs of the system out into the future. Obviously, we're trying to plug those holes out in the future, and we're trying to maintain our goals of affordability, reliability, and environmental sensitivity. So that's kind of the lens from which we look at how we solve those problems out into the future. We model the system, like I said, in terms of capacity expansion. What are the future resources that we need that solve those problems immediately? And then how does it operate? How we have a threshold for reliability that capacity expansion has to solve. So we can't just plug the holes in terms of capacity. It has to create the most reliable system that we can create. Luke brought up the idea of kind of the cost benefit. You know, when we start to look at what are the potentials that we can plug in there, we know that there is no perfect resource, right? There's nothing that ticks all the boxes with no negatives. So what we're trying to do is optimize the system and try to say, these are all the things we need. That's not all going to come from one resource, and that's why we try to create a diverse portfolio. The secondary question there is, again, this is an exercise in predicting the future, right? We're going to get it wrong, and we all know that. So what we try to do is look at the modeling through the lens of several possible potential futures. And we say, let's model it with, say 10 different futures that all vary, different variables that we might see out into the future. And what we're trying to get is the future portfolio that best satisfies the majority of those futures. We're trying to get to a no regrets, future-proof kind of an action plan. And that's an important point too, that what we aim to get out of the integrated system plan is a 10-year action plan. So we'll model a longer term, but say, hey, we know that things are more predictable within the next 10 years, and that's when we really aim to take action there. The question about what those futures look like and what the modeling should look at into the future is where we really want to gain perspective from the public. We will be engaging in workshops as part of the integrated system plan. We'll have one per quarter throughout the year. And those are kind of equal parts educational opportunities where we can bring people along with us, give you background on what we're talking about, how the modeling works, what we're going to consider, what our landscape looks like, and then ask for feedback as well. And these scenarios are really where we want to focus a lot of the feedback that we're soliciting. You know, we've got certain focus that we look at into the future, but we know we're not seeing everything. We're not seeing all of the potential variable changes. We're not seeing all of the potential risks down the line. So that's where we really think that public engagement is going to be valuable here, is asking, hey, give us some input on what you think those futures might look at. And even, like I said, individual variables that might change out into the future that we need to roll up into these scenarios. So we'll have the workshops, and then we'll also have engagement opportunities on our OPPD Community Connect website. That website will have general information just as a source of background. It will also have recordings and summaries of the workshops. If you miss one, you certainly can catch up and be prepared to engage in the next workshop as it comes. And there will also be a platform there to submit questions and comments and things like that. So very excited about that, and very excited about getting perspectives from others. Like I said, sometimes we can have blinders on and we know what's most important to us, but maybe there are other things that we need to cast a little wider net and take a little wider look at the things that are important to people, both in terms of risk and in terms of opportunity. So we're very, very excited about the ISP as it continues, and kind of soliciting that public feedback and getting everybody's thoughts and questions answered as we go along.
Thank you. Charlie, you had a lot of thoughts on economic development. You know, you've got a room full of local leaders here. If you had a call to action for, how do we thread this needle of both energy and economic development, what would be your call to action to the leaders here in the room today?
The call to action is get everybody in the room, bring in all the partners that you need to make the project successful, and I talked about it. It's OPPD, it's Black Hills Energy, get your engineers involved, the wastewater folks, the water folks. Just get everyone involved so we can all sit at the table and bang it out and figure out how to make it work. I mean, that's my advice. It's not rocket science, but a lot of times I don't see that, and I don't see projects where you get everybody together to talk about it.
Great. And then Luke, you're going to be continuing here with us as part of the workshop here that follows this. Do you want to set up a little bit about, the RSTEP project and program and what your team from ISU Extension is going to be talking about the resources that will be available through RSTEP?
Sure, yeah. So we are going to be talking about, we're going to be sort of demoing, or we've done it in the past, but we're sort of presenting a shortened version of one of the kind of key deliverables for this project, which is we're doing education workshops around the state in Iowa. If you like what you see here today, get in touch with us. We'd be more than happy to bring it to your community. And we kind of focus on some combination of fundamentals of solar, wind, and battery energy storage systems from the perspective of a local official. So what are the things that a local official needs to be on the lookout for? We also are setting up a series of, once the weather gets nicer, site visits to existing wind, solar, and battery projects around the state. Some that are kind of bog standard, as well as some more innovative projects. For instance, we've got one in May and one in August at Iowa State University's public-private partnership project, sorry, little B's there, with Alliant Energy on an agrivoltaics demonstration project just south of campus. So that's looking at siting and building solar arrays with different types of crops that can be grown underneath, adjacent to, alongside those panels. They actually also just got a grant looking at the possibility of adding solar grazing to some sites. We've got a project website where we're putting resources that have been developed by both academic resources and resources from nonprofit organizations working in this space. So things like best practices for putting together a zoning ordinance, research studies on infrasound. I'm working with a soil scientist at Iowa State to look at the impact that the tire size and pressure of different types of construction vehicles that are present in the construction of one of these sites can have on soil compaction. So down to like really the nitty gritty, getting some of, just turns out to be like one of the best soil scientists in the world at Iowa State. Surprise, surprise there. And his office is down the hall from mine. So might as well take advantage of that. We're also working on developing a kind of small-scale GIS tool to help counties visualize the impact that different setback distances from different types of buildings for different types of energy resources could have on the feasibility of siting different kinds of projects in their community. And then we're also providing technical assistance to local officials. So if you or your zoning administrator or another or a consultant is working on updating or amending a comprehensive plan or a zoning code, and you're looking to include language or amend language that deals with solar, wind, and batteries, we've got staff that are able to help kind of work through what some of that language might look like depending on community concerns. And one other thing that we're doing is we're trying to facilitate conversations. Like what Charlie was saying, it seems like a lot of the time what needs to happen is more people need to get into a room together and sort of hash these issues out, hear one another's perspectives, and kind of get a sense for like, is there room to compromise? And we've got a lot of facilitators at Iowa State who do that day in and day out for all sorts of different groups, large and small, and we're looking to kind of bring that kind of, not a prepackaged conversation starter, but sort of a toolkit of topics to consider for a community that maybe hasn't seen a lot of development yet, but is expecting to see some more development in the future, so that they're ready when they do get that application or when people do start contacting landowners looking to sign ground up for leases to know what they can ask for and how much wiggle room they have. One other thing I did want to mention that I didn't mention earlier around sort of the local control versus statewide economic development piece is sort of the role that state preemption plays in this whole space. I think for those in the room from Iowa, you might be aware that there's two bills right now. One's been introduced in the House, one's been introduced in the Senate that would set statewide standards for siting for wind, solar, and battery. So essentially overriding the the county's ordinances that they put time, effort, and energy and money in many instances into developing. So there's always that kind of lurking state preemption piece kind of in the background. And we've seen that over the years for a number of different issues kind of at the intersection of land use and economic development, where the state has taken control away, thinking CAFOs back 20 years ago or so. So there's always that to keep in mind, and we talked a little bit about that in the presentation as well.
Excellent. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists here today for the comprehensive. As a proud Cyclone, I'm always happy to hear the words Iowa State and best in the same sentence. So thank you for that, Luke. But I'm going to welcome Supervisor Steve Detlefs back up to adjourn the meeting.
I'd also like to thank the panel for enlightening us on the challenges of getting the right power to the right place, at the right time, and at, most importantly, the right price. So, at this time, our business meeting is concluding, and we need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. We will take a 10-minute break, and we will resume with the gentleman from the ISU Extension Office. Thank you.
All right. So if you are staying for the workshop, it'll be here in this room. Otherwise, you're welcome to kind of continue the conversations here today out in the podium. So thank you so much for being here.